Nationalist Party has a status of opposition in the parliament.
Yeah.
But in these elections, they have lost that.
Yeah.
Then you are talking about the policies like the seniors who are homeless, sleeping on the streets, and previously your party, they were supporting the more housing, affordable. Now when you are not in the power to say anything, how can we believe that the things you're talking, those will be implemented? So
the aspect just for the seniors, this healthcare system is senior is being so difficult to get this benefit for the especially seniors. As I know, working for the seniors, I'm representing now for the together with Senior Society, we work for the seniors.
What's your reaction to the EV deal Mr. Carney did yesterday? How you think how it will affect auto sector in Ontario?
Agreement with China is part of a bigger conversation around the chaos that Trump is causing in the world, not just economically, but also, you know, the entire systems that we base our diplomacy, our economy, our defense, our trade, all of those systems are under attack. You know.
ਮੈਂ ਪਰਮਜੀਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਭੰਗੂ ਸ਼ਵਾਰਕ ਟੀਵੀ ਚੈਨਲ ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ। ਅਸੀਂ ਮੌਜੂਦ ਹਾਂ ਅੱਜ ਫਾਲਕਨ ਰਿਜ ਦੇ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਸੈਂਟਰ ਕੈਲਗਰੀ ਵਿਖੇ, ਜਿੱਥੇ ਨਿਊ ਡੈਮੋਕ੍ਰੈਟਿਕ ਪਾਰਟੀ NDP ਵੱਲੋਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਇੱਕ ਵਿਸ਼ੇਸ਼ ਮੀਟਿੰਗ ਕੀਤੀ ਗਈ। ਮੀਟਿੰਗ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦੇ ਜਥੇਬੰਦਕ ਢਾਂਚੇ ਨੂੰ ਮਜ਼ਬੂਤ ਕਰਨ ਤੇ ਨਵੀਂ ਮੈਂਬਰਸ਼ਿਪ ਕੱਟਣ ਤੇ ਵਿਚਾਰਾਂ ਹੋਈਆਂ, ਉੱਥੇ ਕੈਲਗਰੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੱਸਦੇ ਪੰਜਾਬੀਆਂ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਇਸ ਮੀਟਿੰਗ ਵਿੱਚ ਭਰਵੀਂ ਸ਼ਮੂਲੀਅਤ ਕੀਤੀ ਗਈ। ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਸਵਾਲਾਂ ਦੇ ਜਵਾਬ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਬੁਲਾਰੇ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਬਾਖੂਬੀ ਦਿੱਤੇ ਗਏ। ਅਸੀਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਵਿਖਾਉਂਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਸਾਰੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੀਆਂ ਮੁੱਖ ਝਲਕੀਆਂ, ਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਬਣੇ ਰਹੋ ਸ਼ਵਾਰਕ ਟੀਵੀ ਚੈਨਲ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ।
It's a real pleasure to be able to be in this room, to have an opportunity to have a conversation with all of you as we look to rebuild the federal NDP in this country. You know, it's so important that we have a strong progressive party that is representing the interests of Canadians across the country. It's not good for our democracy. It's not good for Canadians when we don't have a party that can hold the Liberals accountable for the promises that they've made to Canadians. It's really important. You know, I chose to put my name forward because I do see what happens in the House of Commons when we don't have a strong progressive party. And for me, it's very important that the minute this leadership race ends, that we are able to hit the ground running as New Democrats in rebuilding our party. And part of that means, you know, being able to go into the House of Commons. So as a member of Parliament for Edmonton Strathcona, as a member of Parliament for Alberta, I'm the only candidate in this race that actually has a seat in the House of Commons. And I think that's important because we need to do this work urgently. You know, I look around the world right now, and I look at what's happening in our country. I look at the fact that people are increasingly not being able to afford to live. You know, that promise that people had, that if you got a job and you worked hard, you'd be able to buy a house, you'd be able to pay for your groceries, you know, your kids could go to school. That deal is broken, and that's not the case anymore. And in our communities, we have people that are really, really struggling right now. How many people?
Assault weapons to be had in our own.
So just a couple things, and I know some people have to leave, so I did want to, before I answer these questions, I'm just on your table there are some forms. Please take them. You have until January 28th to buy a membership in the party. We would really appreciate it if you would get a membership in the NDP. When you are a member of the Alberta NDP, you are also a member of the federal NDP, and you can then vote in the leadership race. It's really important. So if you look on your table, there is information on how to buy a membership, but we would really like that. If you would prefer a paper copy, we also have paper copies that you can fill out to become a member so that you can vote and you can have a say in the leadership race. It's very important. So just in case people are getting up and having to go, I wanted to make sure I said that first.
But yeah, so going back, with provincial government doing this, it's not only in Alberta, it's all over Canada. People are having trouble finding a job, and AI is going to start taking away. I honestly want the government, whoever in power, to implement policies prioritizing paid labor over the excessive use of technology.
Sure, I'm happy to.
And I'm not saying that AI or robots.
And we have to hold her accountable for that. But I'm going to pass it over to these guys because I know they know a lot more about some of those things, especially the implementation.
We can explain it later.
Start there, then I'll go to AI, and then we can finish. In terms of healthcare for seniors, you are absolutely right. Seniors have more complex healthcare needs. They will be at more risk in a failing healthcare system than any other group. And the costs that we know that are being associated with healthcare are going up. So if Danielle Smith is able to move to a two-tiered healthcare system, it will hurt seniors the most. And the reason that is because when you have a public and a private version, those private doctors have the ability to choose who their patients are. And they're not going to choose the complex cases. They're going to choose the easy cases. If they're getting paid the same, they're not going to choose a senior that may also have heart problems or high blood pressure or other complications. So it makes it much worse. And you talked a little bit about pensions being so low. The OAS, the old age security, has not gone up. And I know all of us in this room look at things and we think, well, that's for seniors. But remember, that's the best case scenario for us. Is that we become seniors, that we get to grow old in our communities. So we need to make sure that our old age security keeps up. The NDP has long said, I have long fought to make sure that it is equitable. Right now it is a different rate for 65 to 74 in Sudbury, Ontario. Is that in that community and in many communities across this country, the fastest growing population of people who are having to live on the streets, who are having to sleep outside in our cold Canada winters, are seniors. That is the fastest growing population of unhoused people in this country. We have a housing emergency that we have to deal with. The cost of groceries. The fact that Canadian families are going to be asked to pay $1,000 more in 2026 than they did in 2025, and it was already so expensive. Many families don't have that extra $1,000. And as we see what happens in the rest of the world, as we see what Donald Trump is doing, people across this country are rightfully very worried about their jobs, very worried about our economy, how we're going to make sure that we can keep our jobs, that we have protections in place if we lose our jobs, that young people in our community have a future, that they can find a job. All of these things are so important, and it's why we need a strong new. Because she wants to be able to bring in her friends who will make a lot of money with healthcare. But we have to be clear, one of the things we cherish as Canadians is our healthcare, is our public healthcare, is the idea that no matter who you are, no matter if you're in, Fort McMurray or Prince Edward Island, you have access to good quality healthcare. And we need to fight for that. And that's a federal thing as much as it is a provincial thing. We have a law in this country called the Canada Health Act. We need to be using those levers within the Canada Health Act to hold premiers, conservative premiers like Danielle Smith, accountable. There's so much that we can do to have a strong economy, to protect people in our communities, to make sure that our healthcare, that our housing, all of those things are being done in a way that is progressive and strong and Canadian. And that's what I want to build. That's the kind of party I want to build. I want to work with my colleagues in the Alberta NDP. I want to work with the provincial parties across the country. You know, right now the federal NDP is diminished, but our provincial parties are very, very strong. You know, we can see in Manitoba, British Columbia, where we are government. Alberta and Saskatchewan, we are soon to be government. You know, official opposition in Nova Scotia and Ontario. We need to select a leader who will work and who knows how to work with the.
Thank you so much. I think most people are here to hear from you, so I'm glad to be here. Heather is only MP for NDP from Alberta and is a strong voice for Alberta in Ottawa. She has spoken on issues that matter to Albertans, healthcare. Lately, as Heather mentioned, the Premier is pretty much dismantling our public healthcare, and the only person voicing any objection to that is Heather McPherson. We have almost 3 conservative MPs, and we didn't hear a peep from any of them. And they have been representing Alberta in House of Commons, like in those numbers for years, but they never speak about what matters to our communities. Heather has also been a steadfast advocate for human rights, issues that are happening down south, issues that are happening in the Middle East, issues that are happening, things that are happening in Ukraine. She has led the charge in holding this government to account and voicing her concerns and concerns of so many Albertans that were not represented. So let's hear from Heather what she has to say.
Right, because there's a lot of pieces in there. I'm trying to keep them straight in my brain.
About systems, really, like how can we reframe the systems? Because all of it's connected. We're talking about jobs, job security, you know, unemployment, cost of living. Like everything's going up, and we're taking people, like their ways of making money away. How can we possibly deal with this, like as individuals against the system?
And you're right, it is a system, and the system was set up to work this way. Like that's the thing, because it is working really, really well with the wealthy people in our communities who are benefiting from this system. And you're right, people are getting further and further and further behind.
Yeah, and I guess the other main thing was like protection for people who are like teachers in Alberta, like they have rights stripped from us. And I really had hoped that the federal government could at least step in and say no. When we sell to the world that, you know, we're a country who is always about the rights of people across the globe, what about right here in Alberta?
Well, and let's start there. So the question's a little bit about protecting the rights of people in Alberta and what the federal government can do to push back when we see a provincial government taking away the rights of Albertans. And I want people to understand how dangerous what Danielle Smith did is. Because putting the notwithstanding clause preeminently into legislation before anything else has been tried,
I just want to actually build a little bit on what you talked about. Recently, teachers lost their rights, many rights under the notwithstanding clause, and it was sold to Albertans as, well, it's for the protection of kids when kids could have actually returned to school the very next day, and the arbitration could have been used for bargaining for teachers' work rights. Teaching has to be a women's job, and it's targeted. I've been a teacher for over 25 years actually now, and when I used to have students, I started my career, they would go to oil rigs, and they would just have a high school diploma, and they would be making a 6-figure salary almost right away. And the expectation that workers should do work for free or volunteer and not be paid for that work is really something that's difficult. And what I don't understand is in the same case of healthcare, how can the federal government come in and really take care of this issue? Because growing up in Alberta, I was always told that, oh, well, we're going to Afghanistan or we're going to the Middle East because we want to free those people. And yet we are here in Canada and experiencing our rights being taken away. And what you just said about the cost of living, supermarkets, they throw out food all the time, so when we go to the store to buy something, we're not just paying for that product, we're paying for them to also throw out items, which increases the cost of everything. So what I'd like to see from the NDP is a repetitive campaign where they can explain these numbers again and again, and where by not providing proper education, by not providing proper healthcare services, there's so many people that are unemployed but yet need services, get them working. By not providing that within the infrastructure, we're actually just fishing out money to corporations, and we are being left without anything. And this needs to be rinsed, repeated. And I go to all of these sessions and I say this, and I want to see this now in real time. I don't want this to be something that I'm going to be an old woman going, why didn't this happen in my lifetime?
Of two parties. We want a robust democracy. You know, we need a progressive party that pulls the parties to think more about what working class Canadians are going through. And so for me, that's why we have to rebuild this party. Now you say we don't have party status, and that's actually true within the House, but it doesn't mean we're not a party, and it doesn't mean we're not members of Parliament. You know, my vote counts the exact same as Mark Carney's vote, as Pierre Poilievre's vote, all of the votes. You know, we're members of Parliament. Once we're in the House, we are equals. So for me, that's a bit of it. Now you talk a little bit about some of those policies, and one of the ones you brought up was housing. I'm very, very proud of our housing policy, and you can go to our website. It's on the cards that you see there, but I'll give you a really brief overview. It's a little more detailed online if you want more details. The first thing that we need to do is declare a national housing emergency. And what that does is mobilize resources so that we actually can do the things that need to be done. The fact is, I'm going to be very blunt. For decades, we have not invested in housing in our communities, and we have not built sufficient homes. That's the reality. So the things that need to happen now, we need to get corporations and corporate interests out of housing. People are buying housing to speculate. They're using it as not as a home. And what we need to see, particularly in places like Toronto and Vancouver, is that housing is a home. That the people can live in those houses. It's not something that you trade on the stock market. It's a home. We also need to build much more affordable nonprofit and co-op housing. No one should be spending more than 30% of their income on housing in this country. No one. And right now, people are spending 60, 70, 80% of their income on housing. We also need to make sure that we have protections for renters in this country. Alberta is one of the only places in the entire country where there is no rent protection.
System, but how would you protect that, and what is the Alberta policies to make it private, you know, which is not in our interest. And secondly, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police is also the issue for Alberta. They are also have an eye on to make it Albertans or private, or who knows what they have in their mind. And why they are doing that, you should please mention that. What they not getting out of Royal Canadian Police, what they will get when they have their own RC police force. Please mention that.
Thank you. I'll start a little bit to talk a little bit about some of that, and then I'm going to pass it to my colleagues because they know a little bit more about the healthcare being implemented at the provincial level. But listen, the RCMP, that's very similar to other things that we've seen Danielle Smith do. It's a distraction. It will cost Albertans money to do that, and it's not something that Albertans have been asking for. It's the same as your pension plan. You know, to take Alberta out of the CPP. It's not Danielle Smith's money. It's your money. It's your retirement that you've paid into. And her threatening that so that she can throw it at some scheme to support other private industry is wrong. I wrote a bill that will make it impossible very difficult, not impossible, but very difficult for Alberta to leave the CPP. I think there's ways that we can protect using federal rules and federal legislation to protect our pensions, to protect the RCMP in our province. But it is part of a play. It's a distraction. You know, she wants us all to be distracted from the fact that the healthcare system is broken, from the fact that your education system is broken, from the fact that she has forced back 51,000 teachers and taking away their rights, that she has not dealt with the fact that we have, you know, amongst the lowest spending in education and all of the
Comments. So I've spent my life navigating lots of systems from courtrooms to social services, and I often see advocates who don't actually have lived experiences making the decisions for those people. So anyway, my question is, how will you change the NDP structure so that people with lived experience in poverty and disability are actually in the room as decision makers, not just used as stories for a campaign? Would you commit to creating a formal disability advisory council that reports directly to you? You become the leader.
So thank you. And just in case folks didn't hear that question, it was how are you going to make sure that people with lived experiences are centered in the policy making and in the way that the party runs? Is that right? Just want to make sure. So that's an excellent question, and thank you for asking it. And I think it's something that we have not done very well as a party recently. We were in the last parliament, our party became very centered. You know, we weren't going out and meeting with people. We weren't talking to people. We weren't working with people. And that's the wrong direction for the NDP, because we are a grassroots movement. We are a movement based on our members. Now, we do have some things that are already in place, of course. You know, we have committees that are focused on people living with disabilities, with other groups that are particularly vulnerable. So there is that. But I think we need to have people at the table if we are making any decision. You know, one of the things that I made very, very clear at the beginning is I wasn't going to come up with a housing strategy or a housing policy without talking to people who were unhoused, without talking to people who couldn't afford housing. So I 100% will commit to you that we will make sure that the people who the policies impact are at the table helping to design those policies. That's the only way you get good policy development. It's the only way.
Does anyone have any questions?
So when you're saying that you guys are going to be different, what strategies are you planning to use, especially for healthcare services? Like, I have an elderly mother. I refuse to go to a hospital in Northeast, and I take her all the way to Central because services are different there. So what strategies is NDP trying to use or establish, should you come in power, that would actually make difference in the healthcare system? And we don't need small change. We need a full takeover.
So the question was, how will you fix the healthcare system? What changes would you make to the healthcare system? So there's a couple things I want to say there. First of all, as somebody that is running at the federal level, the role of the federal government is that we provide the funding to the provinces to implement the healthcare system, to put that in place. And the original deal, the original healthcare system was put in place by Tommy Douglas and the NDP. We were the ones that pushed the government to put in Medicare at the very beginning. And at the beginning, healthcare was intended to be 50% paid for by the federal government and 50% paid for by the provincial government. Now, the federal government has dropped the ball. So right now, the federal government pays about 26% of the transfer payments to each province. So the federal government is not doing its fair share. So that would need to change. That's a key thing. I look at things like a 5% defense spend that Mark Carney has put in this most recent budget, and I support increasing our defense spending, but not to 5% and not at the same time that we are cutting healthcare transfers. So healthcare is something all Canadians should access. The next thing that we need to do is we need to make sure that we are following the Canada Health Act. So that says that we need equitable, single-payer healthcare. Danielle Smith is breaking the law when she introduces a dual stream of healthcare, a two-tiered American-style healthcare system. And so the federal government has an obligation to step in at that point. When federal laws are being broken, there is an obligation, and the government has done it before. So for example, in New Brunswick, they were limiting the access to care and the funding was withheld. So it can be done. The federal government needs to do that. That's what I would do if I was the leader.
I just want to talk about your party. Previously, party had a status of opposition in the parliament.
Yeah.
But in these elections, they have lost that.
Yeah.
Then you are talking about the policies like the seniors who are homeless, sleeping on the streets, and previously your party, they were supporting the more housing, afford housing. But now when you are not in the power to say anything, how can we believe that the things you're talking, those will be implemented? So what your party is doing, their policies and strategies, so that people can believe them and vote them. So that is one question. And the other is, what plans will be of your party if they are in the power, that the people who are the seniors or older adults, they are homeless and they are sleeping on the roads. So what new things you will do, your party?
Thank you very much. So first of all, I want to be very clear. We have 7 members of parliament right now in the NDP, so we are a long ways away from making government. That's not what we do. However, at the moment, what we can talk about is the role the NDP can play in a minority government. So we actually have the ability to put pressure on the government to do the right thing, even with 7. You know, Mark Carney has a minority government. He needs somebody to work with if he wants to get anything through the House of Commons. Sometimes he gets the Conservatives to vote with him, sometimes he gets the Bloc Québécois, but he can also come to us if he is doing those things that are useful for Canadians. It's how we got the dental care program in place. You know, the dental care program that has now been accessed by 6 million Canadians who did not have dental care before. So I understand what you're saying, that we are small, but in minority parliaments, being small actually still allows you to have quite a lot of power. That said, my goal for our party is to grow it. You know, I am a politician, and I am unabashedly interested in our party winning more seats. And not because it's good for the New Democrats, but because it's what the minister should be doing is protecting Canadian jobs. Because if we can't protect Canadian jobs, then we will not have an economy that can thrive. You had a second follow-up.
Yeah, I have a follow-up. Like you saw what happened in Plantus, in Brampton Assembly Plant. Because I come from Unifor, which is the largest public sector union, 320,000 members from coast to coast. Different sector, big sectors are railway, auto, airline, all the sector, right? You see what happened, same thing. They took the money from federal government and now they're going to US. Whose money is that? Taxpayers' money. But
yeah, and every one of those jobs should have been a string attached.
yes.
And if a company is going to take federal dollars and then leave the country, they should have to leave those resources behind, and the workers should have the ability to own it. Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I went down to Windsor. I was in Windsor just before the election, talking to folks. These are bad decisions being made, not just for Canada. These are bad decisions for Americans. This is a bad path that we are on right now, and we need the federal government to step up and protect workers' rights, and we're not seeing it. You know, I look at how fast this government tried to use 107 against the flight attendants, the Air Canada flight attendants. It was less than 12 hours between when they went on strike and when they were trying to force them back using legislation. 12 hours. How on earth can workers negotiate and bargain for you know, how can collective bargaining work if employers know the federal government will step in and take their side?
That's their basic charter right.
It's part of it. It's a human right that you can negotiate your wage. We're seeing it with CUPW, CUPW, the postal workers. We're seeing it with other unions. This is important. And since we're talking about workers' rights, one thing I will also say is that, you know, the NDP is the only party that is putting forward legislation to fix that. You know, to stop scab labor. What the minister should be doing is protecting Canadian jobs. Because if we can't protect Canadian jobs, then we will not have an economy that can thrive. You had a second follow-up.
Yeah, I have a follow-up. Like you saw what happened in Plantus, in Brampton Assembly Plant. Because I come from Unifor, which is the largest public sector union, 320,000 members from coast to coast. Different sector, big sectors are railway, auto, airline, all the sector, right? You see what happened, same thing. They took the money from federal government and now they're going to US. Whose money is that? Taxpayers' money. But
yeah, and every one of those jobs should have been a string attached.
yes.
And if a company is going to take federal dollars and then leave the country, they should have to leave those resources behind, and the workers should
There
have
should
the
be
ability
accountability.
to own it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Listen, I went down to Windsor. I was in Windsor just before the election, talking to folks. These are bad decisions being made, not just for Canada. These are bad decisions for Americans. This is a bad path that we are on right now, and we need the federal government to step up and protect workers' rights. And we're not seeing it. You know, I look at how fast this government tried to use 107 against the flight attendants, the Air Canada flight attendants. It was less than 12 hours between when they went on strike and when they were trying to force them back using legislation. 12 hours. How on earth can workers negotiate and bargain for you know, how can collective bargaining work if employers know the federal government will step in and take their side?
That's their basic charter right.
It's part of it. It's a human right that you can negotiate your wage. We're seeing it with CUPW, CUPW, the postal workers. We're seeing it with other unions. This is important. And since we're talking about workers' rights, one thing I will also say is that, you know, the NDP is the only party that is putting forward legislation to fix that. You know, to stop scab labor.
Healthcare system here is broken or the not going as it should be. But I'm emphasizing we discuss every aspect. Just for the seniors, this healthcare system is being so difficult to get this benefit for the especially seniors. As I know, working for the seniors, I'm representing now for together with Senior Society, we work for the seniors, and then we saw in a COVID time, from then we started working on that. Seniors are so isolated at that time and left behind, and then everybody, you know, who have the power, who have the strength, they are saving from this COVID pandemic, but the seniors were left behind. Since then, our organization is reviewing this, how senior people are getting benefit or left behind, we know that now, once you are working group, you have a insurance, paying your benefit, everything. Once you retire, here the system is so, this CPP or these things, money comes very little, they have to, the families is separating at that time. Kids are grown and they separate, and seniors will be isolated, and they have a less food to, hard to purchase the food, and housing is so expensive now, and pension is so low, and then it goes, afterwards it goes to the healthcare system, and the personal, they are suffering. So you said a couple of things earlier, I don't want to repeat that, but what is your future policy, and then the Alberta government, we are expecting next time to NDP, so how we can get, and then maybe we are going to be a senior in tomorrow, so what will be the future for the seniors mainly for the health benefit, and then, yeah.
I was meeting you when I was greeting you. What's your reaction to the EV deal Mr. Carney did yesterday? How you think how it will affect auto sector in Ontario?
So listen, what we saw happen yesterday with Mark Carney and his agreement with China is part of a bigger conversation around the chaos that Trump is causing in the world, not just economically, but also, you know, the entire systems that we base our diplomacy, our economy, our defense, our trade, all of those systems are under attack. You know, Donald Trump has thrown the international rule-based order into chaos. Absolutely. So I don't want to be overly harsh on Mark Carney in some ways. I understand that what he is dealing with right now with Donald Trump is very, very difficult, very, very hard. And the threat to our economy is enormous. But frankly, to not recognize how important it is to protect our auto sector, especially at a moment in time when we are being attacked on all sides by Donald Trump, is irresponsible. And it's part of a bigger picture for me. I don't understand the negotiation tactics that we're seeing. So you'll all remember in April when Mr. Carney ran on the idea of elbows up. You know, he talked a lot about elbows up. You know, we're gonna push back. And what we've seen is as far as I can see, and I'm not at the negotiating tables, but as far as I can see, a lot of appeasement of Donald Trump. And I don't know that that is the right way to deal with a bully. I'm not sure that that is actually going to get us where we want to get to. You know, a defense spend of 5%, the Golden Dome, getting rid of the digital sales tax so that web giants paid their fair share. You know, all of these pieces that we are seeing, I worry about. And I worry what Canadians are getting. You know, I think that Mr. Carney is trying to do stuff, but I also think he is missing the mark on some of it, and I also think he is not communicating with Canadians on it. Like, I look at Algoma Steel. $500 million was given to Algoma Steel, and I support that we do what we can to support our steel industry, so we support those jobs. But $500 million was given to Algoma Steel, and 2 weeks before Christmas, they laid off 1,000 workers. And there should be strings attached to all of that.